pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming in. So we have a motion to, on the resolution to hold a closed meeting for negotiation strategy after the meeting.
So moved, at least.
Second that?
Okay, motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Delayed reaction. Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Public comment? Okay. Thank you. Okay, consent items. Do we have a motion to approve the consent items?
Motion.
A motion?
Second.
A second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Favor? I'm trying to keep everybody on track here.
It's French. It's
French. Yeah, thanks. Didn't want anybody to know that. Discussion items. Okay, planning on potential retirement.
Marcia has said that she would like to, in fact, would like to, by the end of December, and she knows that that's too early to actually write down everything that she does. So she's working on creating a binder of everything that she does as far as all the steps for the STAR report, all the HR, ACA reporting that she does. The other, she's taken over all of the health records and the drug testing for the bus drivers. She's in charge of managing all of that. So any of those confidential, secure type, anything with a HIPAA concern, she's the person. And it's too much for anyone else in the office to take on. But right now it's an 18-hour-a-week job. To try to post for an 18-hour-a-week job, we're not going to get it. And there are enough other things that we could, where people, if we reposition, and looking at, because there are some things that, like with the high school secretary, the one we had before, knew the job well, and the one we have now is still learning it. But the one we had before could keep up with all of the AD, except I think it's a case where now that the principal is taking on the AD, the secretary has all of the paperwork, where Lisa did a lot of the paperwork last year as AD. And so now that has taken up a lot of time. Well, it hasn't, because some of that work is now fell over to Anne to help with, and so she's now crunched for time because she can't get that done. So I'm looking at, maybe it would make sense for all the Mars reporting to go to this person, and then this person would do all of the Mars reporting, all of the STAR, and the STAR reporting is what goes in as far as every teacher and the classes that each teacher is teaching, especially at the high school level, to make sure that every course is aligned with their license and what their license allows them to teach as far as that course. And so it makes sense to do the Mars and then possibly the MC Cubed that we need to do. MC Cubed is the Minnesota Comprehensive Core Catalog, and that is aligning all of the Mars numbers, so all the students, every class they're taking, and making sure that every class is coded according to the state code that goes on that class. And so it's a reporting database nightmare. But that, I don't want to just post for what it is right now, because as I said, we're not going to find anybody. But then when
So
somebody's
this job will
leaving,
take how many hours? This will be a regular full-time
then this
position?
will be a full-time. And then looking at the supervisory confidential, it would be about that 40 to 41,000 range. And that's about 18,000 more than we're paying now for Marcia's part-time, but Marcia's at the top of the salary schedule, where this one would be coming in at the bottom. But I didn't wanna post for a full-time without getting more approval for that. And talking about the other things that go with that. And we also don't have a communications director. Would it, instead of doing all the MARS and the MC cubed, would it make more sense to be HR, ACA, and, communications? And so it's, because we've got a lot of things that need to be done and a lot of people to do them.
Pretty sad how it's changed, your mom did it all.
And I never saw her because she worked 20 hours a day.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the HR, you looking for qualifications on that? Some of this HR degree kind of like?
And Marcia has a degree from Winona State, and so, yeah, we would need to have somebody. If we wanted somebody with, actually an MBA to do it, we're not gonna get them for 40,000.
How do we compare as far as our office staff versus comparative size school staffs?
With comparative size schools, the school board, Minnesota School Board Association did an evaluation, and even with adding Kelly and having Marcia half-time, I think we are down still 1 to 1.5 people from other school districts our size.
So basically bring in a new person to take on other jobs that have been divvied out to other people, bring them back to one person and then handle it. I think it'd be an easier hire, but like you were saying, as far as the degree wise, I think that's where you're gonna maybe have a
Well, and if it's
difficult.
HR, as far as just the different types of HIPAA, FERPA reporting, that's very different HR than, and doing job postings. She does all the job postings.
So it wouldn't be like a full-blown
It's not a full-blown HR.
It'd be somebody that
Does-
has that.
Does she also do the hiring for the Minnesota Virtue Academy?
The job postings?
No, I mean, yeah, or
She does all the job postings for MNVA, so
checking
with that
background
one,
checks and everything.
yes.
Cause I know my daughter and all was HR, so, male, and she got a degree in that.
Yeah, we can't
Yeah.
compete with
Well,
like,
that's what I'm saying, if you're looking for
Yeah.
somebody that's gonna do full-blown HR, that's different than just somebody that's gonna be,
Yeah.
I'm not saying belittling this job at all, it's a different requirements.
we have to do different requirements because we can't afford full-blown MBA.
So Marcia is out at the end of the year?
She will stay on as long as we need her in order to find somebody and have her train that person in.
So she's gonna develop, like she was saying, a continuity folder, so somebody comes in and says, this happens, open the book, this is what you do, all the steps. To
And
simplify it.
With her husband passing away, I didn't know if she was still going to, because she talked about it before, but that was talking about what the two of them were going to do together. And so I wanted to wait and see if that was still her, and she said more than ever she wants to be.
Well, if you're gonna do something about it, and if you are, I think you pretty much gotta plan on what you're hiring, because the hiring is gonna be a process that's gonna take a while. So because it's gonna take a while, you then have to come up with, what are you hiring first? You know, what is the true position, and do they need a degree in any specific area? And then you go from there, because it's gonna take a while to hire someone. The lesser we pay, the,
Lesser we'll get.
exactly.
And I was thinking
So-
with
so-
what it is right here, with what I didn't mean to cut you off, but what I've got here as far as what we would add to it, that's a human services degree, 4-year human services degree. And we can't go with anything less than, but I was thinking that even with the MARS and with MCQ, that's still human services.
And if you go with a college degree person, 41,000 is gonna be a struggle.
That's a starting teacher.
True, but I don't know that there's as many people out here that would have the qualifications and have the interest too, if you put both those together, to do that kind of job.
My youngest daughter has the qualifications, but she definitely does not have the interest.
Well,
So
the way
you
you
just-
describe it,
We're gonna
I
vote
don't
on
think we have a whole lot of options. I think we gotta do it.
Well, do you wanna, do
So
you
you just
wanna,
want the
do
okay
you wanna
from
keep it with the human services, or do you wanna do something more with communications? And that's, where do you think we need more of the?
Where do we leave
Where
off
do
on the
you think
communication
we need
director?
Yeah, what
Where do you think we need? It's not, I mean, we're not running, we're overseeing what you're running.
I
You know,
think we
you
need
got
it more
Todd
with
and
the,
Rick,
I think we need more with the human services.
and that's what you should look for, and then put together, like Pete was saying, a good description of job description and what their expectations are, so they know from the get-go. And again, Peter mentioned, it's gonna take some time,
I recommend
so I would
that
say, do it.
you can come up with a plan of what you need and outline the job requirements. And while you're doing that, you'll probably, in your own derivative of it, you're going to come up with, are they gonna have to have a college degree? If they are, what does it have to be in? If so, what is the amount of money that we're gonna have to pay? I guess I'd like to see a recommendation on your part of what you need. And then Tom's right, you know, we just oversee what you do. We don't, you know, come up with the plan. So I think it'd be better for you to come up with what your needs are, because you're right in that office. You see.
I just wanted the marching orders, and
No,
now that I
no,
have
no,
them, I'm ready to go.
that's-
Well,
Okay.
and the thing is too, Marcia, I don't think we wanna delay her.
No,
I mean, if Marcia would like to leave, I think we've gotta, she's been a real asset to the district for years. And I remember working with Marcia, she is a wonderful person. And so that's why, let's meet her needs and her wishes and everything to the best of our ability. And so the sooner we can do this, I think the better for our behalf.
I will,
So you're gonna take this as an administrative thing and
Run with it.
put together a job description and post it?
absolutely.
Okay.
I just needed the marching orders,
Yep.
and now I have them. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, concerns on that?
But the overall benefits will be more, we're just, 18 is the base salary.
No, 18
No,
is,
no.
18
No.
is, but we're paying more.
I get that, but that's not, there'll be more
Well-
due to benefits now that this person will be full-time.
Yeah, 40 to 41 will be the base, and then there'll be benefits on top.
That's what I mean,
Yeah.
where Marshall wasn't,
Right,
Right.
yeah,
right,
just for the overall
We may
picture.
find out, she may find out that the base may have to be a little higher than that.
Yeah,
We
keep
don't
us
know that
posted
yet.
on that, but I was just saying,
Yeah.
it's gonna be more than.
Oh, yeah, with everything else.
Oh, no, that's just salary, it's not all the bennies.
Right.
Right.
You know that now, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Okay,
January, organizational meeting, date, time.
Thursdays were good for me always.
okay, and now here's the rub. If it's a Thursday, we can't meet until Thursday, January 9th, because January 2nd is the first Thursday, but it has to be the first Thursday after the first Monday.
Cool.
So we'd have 3 meetings then.
Well, if we had it January 9th, January actually is a 5 Thursday month. So we could have the second and fourth Thursdays in January, and then go back to, for February through December,
First.
the first and third.
You said it has to be the first Thursday?
No, it has to be, if we're having meetings on Thursday, we can't have the meeting until after the first Monday
gotcha,
in
okay,
January.
okay.
So therefore, the meeting would have to be January 9th.
I'm good with
Right.
your scenario of 2nd and 4th.
Okay, for the month of January and then switch back to first
Yeah.
and third for the rest?
Yep.
I can't do the ninth,
Okay,
not the tenth.
okay. Yeah, the MSBA is the week that,
Or in between.
it would be the 16th. And so then that's the week in between, so we couldn't have a meeting on the 16th anyway. And so then we would have the 9th as our organizational meeting, and then the 23rd.
Right.
And
And
then
then
there
February,
still
go
is a
back to-
Thursday in between the first February Thursday, because, the January 30th falls in there, so we still have 2 weeks in between meetings. Okay, good.
Okay, we good then?
And, options for the board calendar, did it work last year? I know we didn't approve the tentative schedule, but we talked about the tentative schedule for, committee meetings at that organizational meeting.
Yeah, let's
Did
do
that
it.
help to
Yeah.
have that? Good, I will do that again. Perfect.
And then maybe have the list before that, positions that were the people, as
Yep.
far as committee, all that other stuff, because
I can hand out the
way-
committee, list at the next
I
board
was gonna
meeting,
say
so
next,
that,
cause that way if Pete's not gonna be here, there may be things that he wants to be part of,
right,
that we need, make sure he gets on, if somebody else isn't, or.
And then the things that nobody else wants since he's not here.
Right. Hey, I wasn't gonna say that, Ron.
I know what I'm gonna jump off
The way it goes, doesn't
of.
it?
I'll volunteer Pete.
Yeah.
I got to be union president one year, I was out on maternity leave.
Perfect,
Okay, so I'll hand out the list,
ahead of time, next meeting,
at the next meeting.
yeah. Any other questions on that? Okay, old business, items for discussion and approval. The 2020-2021 calendar.
So that's the tight calendar, that's what the teachers wanted.
Okay.
Well, the only date that we could really move is to
Right
not have the
before
2 days of Education Minnesota days off, and they overwhelmingly said, no, they want both of those, so.
Okay, so we have a motion, do we have a second?
Yeah.
Second, Pete?
Pete's got it.
Discussion, questions, concerns, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Policies,
One thing, I did do, cause they were talking about having the potential of the 45-15 year-round kind of more calendar, and I've done 2 options of that, and I will be, sending it this week with the board update to you guys, and so if you want that to be a discussion item, January 9th at our organizational meeting to start looking at that possibility of a calendar, we can discuss that at the end of the next meeting to see if you want that as an agenda item.
thank you. Okay, so we're done with that one, policies for second reading, do I have a motion to approve policy 304 and 306?
So move.
Second.
Motion as second, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And it's not 6:30 yet, so we
So
cannot,
we'll continue on with new business. Policies first read, anything that we need to know about on these, Ron or Corinne?
For your same.
they're all the same.
Nothing's changed, okay. Have any questions? Make sure you get with someone on. Announcements, important events, MSBA, I think we got everybody, I know it's coming up on canceling the rooms.
Right,
Yeah, I didn't know, Arlen, have you made that decision yet, or?
Yeah, I have.
Okay,
They just told me yesterday what my date was, so yeah, I can.
okay.
If you, see if you can.
and know that people are canceling rooms, there might be some rooms that are opening up,
Okay,
so.
So you're on the list, Ann, for that? Do they give you the option of being on the list?
yeah, I can get on waiting list, I have been on one. So any of the early birds, or just to come for the 2 days, or the
Just
1 day
for the 2
conference?
days.
So will you be up there Wednesday night, or are you coming up to Thursday morning?
Cause it's Thursday and Friday.
Correct.
Yeah, but what time does it start Thursday morning? I can't remember that.
9?
I think registration's at like 8:30, then 9 o'clock is the main presenter that starts.
I should be able to come up with a morning, I think.
So Thursday only. Thank you.
And so if you can get, if rooms open up so you can get Mimi and Pete in our hotel, that would be good.
Mhm.
Okay,
Let's see.
anything else on that? Meeting and committee updates, I know we had a negotiations, can we talk about that later?
And that's what we'll be talking about in closed.
There was no other committee meetings, was there? That I know of.
I lost track of HVAC, where we are. There's an HVAC.
We had one, last week,
Anything happened there?
not really, anything else, basic meeting at this time, it's end of year.
Have they decided on facilities yet or anything?
No,
We're going to have, well, I'm going to have,
superintendent's meeting.
the facility subgroup is meeting at,
Truth and taxation.
the facility subgroup is meeting at, 9 until noon, December 10th? And then the superintendents are meeting from noon until 3, and then finance is meeting at 4:30 until 7. And I'm on all of those. So,
Well, at least you don't have to go home and come back.
I just get to sit at
The
HVAC all
only
day.
thing on HVAC is their PALS labs are working real well for students if they wanna figure out what they wanna go to.
Oh,
for
PACE labs.
PACE labs,
Yep.
yeah. They're working good. I don't know if any of our students ever go to that or not, sure. Cause we can schedule them in, I think.
Yes, we can. And we have had some students there, with varying degrees of success.
I would think Ms. Moda's got all that information as soon as
And
he's interested or
the
she.
PACE labs are mainly there for students that are special education. And so, Alexa,
Oh, okay.
Michaels, and Lisa Evans are the ones that have been dealing with whether or not kids to get sent to PACE
Okay.
labs.
That's good to hear. Anything else?
Oh, we just have to wait for 5 minutes.
Okay, do you wanna do this, future agenda thing? Super
Oh.
feedback, anything there?
So, future agenda, for the January 9th, the future agenda item might possibly be the, 4515, and then putting together a subcommittee to work on that. December 19th. The auditor was not ready for today, so the auditor will be doing a presentation on December 19th. Leslie Lewandowski from K-12 will be here to really explain 2 pathways that I really feel are necessary for us to expand in the DCA program at MNDA. And we will be having a online schools committee meeting prior to that one to go through more of the numbers and the facts and the figures. So if board members want to hear all the numbers and figures about DCA, that will be in the online school committee.
Can you send
Even
that
if
out?
you're not on the online school committee, you can come to that committee and just sit alongside the wall as long as you don't participate, that's okay.
Can you send that out in your minutes to make sure, cause we can,
Right, Mimi and Mike
Mike
are
Lean
on,
are
and I
here
will
and that way.
definitely put that, and, then at the board, it's going to be a very high level overview of what these pathways are and why we are choosing them.
okay,
And then we did have a, community member asked to be given, a part on the discussion. There is a small group, I'm not sure how many, of concerned parents about, making sure we're doing everything we can to make sure our kids are safe. And I do want to say publicly that can we improve? Absolutely. I think everybody can. But are we doing what we're required to do? Are we have we gone through the Alice training? Yes. Have we done, I started asking other superintendents what they have done, and I will have all of that data for you, so that we can be talking about facts and not hearsay.
So it'll be on our package prior to the meeting.
Yes, absolutely. It will be in your package, and you will have the data, and you will have time, if there's something there where you're not sure of what I've written, or if you want something fleshed out a little more, please talk to me, and I can add to the board discussion item so that we have all the facts that we need. But that's,
And then obviously safety is the.
Am I interrupting?
No, come on, sit down.
nope,
You're here for the truth and taxation?
Yeah.
Could I ask you to please sign in?
Sure.
Right there.
Thank
We'll be starting in a few minutes.
What's that?
We'll be starting that in a few minutes, so your timing is
Is that
great.
purely an investigation of the
the.
curiosity in the past, or what spurred that? I'm curious, I'm anxious to see it, I'm just curious what spurred that.
Caledonia was looking at it. There's some other schools that have been, looking at
Wisconsin's a couple schools that are doing it, I
Right.
believe, across.
Rochester, there's a school that's doing it, Austin, there's a school that's doing it, and it's just one of those, okay, let's look at, this is kind of what it would look like, is this still something
to
we
me right
wanna pursue?
I'm very interested, I just wondered what spurred that now, so.
I think we talked about it a year ago or so.
We did.
We did, and it just, I think that the 2021 calendar is so stinking ugly that I think people wanna look at, okay, is there something better out there than the calendars that we have? Yeah, cause 2021, the type calendar, it's not great, loose calendar is worse. So,
Okay, Chromebook, did somebody take one to try it out?
no, nobody has taken one to try one out, so do we have a guinea pig, because we need to. Yeah, so if somebody would, if we have a board member that would like to be a guinea pig to try a Chromebook to see if it works, you need to have Wi-Fi at home. If you don't have Wi-Fi at home, it's not going to work for
I
you.
guess I can.
You got Wi-Fi.
Is that an exchange for our Surface? Or?
Yes,
Yeah.
because I don't think anyone's surfaces are working right now.
Mimi didn't, or Mimi or your,
No, Mimi and Michaeline, neither one has said, oh, please give me a
oh,
Chromebook.
I thought they would. So,
No,
You wanna throw that back out at them?
yeah.
the no takers here.
I can swap it if no one else,
Okay.
I'll be the plan
And you
B.
got wireless?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Well, since I got my laptop straightened out, I'm perfectly fine.
Okay.
So you're saying you
So
don't wanna
if you could,
get one?
I could come back in the office, you could just send me an email when this come and swap in.
perfect,
Okay,
perfect. Thank you for being a guinea pig.
sure.
Well, and so we
At
can
6:30?
adjourn.
Yep. So let's adjourn the meeting to go for truth and taxation. Do you have a motion?
Motion to we adjourn or just?
Yeah,
We adjourn for the truth and taxation.
I second that motion.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, okay.
And so now we can start the truth and taxation hearing. First, thank you for coming.
What's coming in?
Where's everybody?
You're in.
You guys got them scared.
No.
No, we don't want to scare anybody.
No.
Okay, so this is, a little bit of a change from what we have typically used for, PowerPoint slides, but I felt that it was important because there are so many differences between, our taxes and neighboring districts that these slides kind of explain the differences. So if we could go to the next. Okay. Big picture affecting taxes, your property classification. If you live in the city proper of Houston, you will have noticed on your tax property evaluation that your property market value jumped considerably this year as opposed to last year. And we'll talk about that a little later on. Those that lived in rural didn't seem to have as much of a bump. Valley High did. So I'm not sure why the county is, it must have been looking at comparables and something in Valley High must have sold for over market value, so they did an equalization on property values there. I know there were some homes that sold within the city proper that were above their market value, and so they did that equalization. There were 3 laws that changed for the taxes this year. We do have some school district factors affecting it, and then we'll put it together and give you time to ask questions. Okay, so talking about the big picture, the legislature and the governor establishes all the rules. They have the sole authority. They decide how much state aid, they decide the tax bases, they decide who gets charged what percent. We don't have any control over that, nor do we have any control over what your market value is. The school boards, there's our school board. We have levy and aid. Levy is what is basically raised by taxes, and then state aid comes from overall state taxes. So you've got your Minnesota state taxes, and some of that comes back here, and some of it goes to the metro. And then if we had a referendum, we would have to come to the, if you could sign in, please. We would have to go to the voters to ask for some major capital project. If we wanted to build something, we would have to come to the voters and ask for that bond to build. Next slide. So here, there's a misconception that Minnesota government is getting bigger. It's kind of hard to see, but the top line is actually 2016, and then it goes down to fiscal 20, fiscal 21. So this is the percent of your personal income that's actually going to state and local taxes. And you'll see that the percent of your income actually going to state and local taxes is going down. I know it doesn't feel that way.
It's not that way for me, but go ahead.
Yeah, okay. And there's also, you've got not only state and local taxes, but you've also got the federal in there, and I don't have any of those slides. So, taxes are actually declining, and I know it doesn't feel that way, but and it's expected to decline. I just got something from Sam Walston, who works with Minnesota Rural Education Association, and the government, the Minnesota government just came out and said that they have gained more money, so they've got more in reserves than they thought they did. Some of their costs were less, and they raised more money in revenues than they expected. And so they're now sitting on, I think it was 1.2 billion. So something's got to give, because they're not giving it back to us in the form of education, nor are they giving it back to us in the form of infrastructure. There is some talk of revamping taxes again statewide so that the amount of your income going for taxes is less too, but that's not going to hit the legislature until February, and this is the short session. So if that hits in February and they have to be done in May, that doesn't give them much time to get stuff done. So that's the big picture for Minnesota government. Next slide. So here's state aid, who collects. So the state collects 62%, the local school collects 8%, and that should say, so it should say local non-school, and I couldn't change the slide. So it's other local governments, so like state, county, city, township, that's 30% who collects it. Who spends it? Now notice we collect 8%, but we spend 27%. That's because that 8% that we collect is levy. And then that 20%, there's 8% that's levy and another 19% that's aid, so that the state's giving us. Because education and roads are the two big costs for the state. Basic education formula, since 2003, the main issue is that state funding has not kept up with inflation. I've got some graphs here later on to really show that. We have had some different funding mechanisms in the state of Minnesota. In 1971, there was a major change. In 93, there was another change, and then in 2013, they had to do another change. What happens is there's a change to equalize so that those of us in rural greater Minnesota are getting comparable funding to those schools in the metro. And then legislatively, it tends to start splitting off because those people in the metro have more voting rights, or more voting power, I should say. And then it starts splitting off, and then it gets to the point where greater Minnesota says, we're going to sue because we're not getting equal funding. And then they revamp the whole funding mechanism again, and it brings it back together. So now we're in 2014, they brought it back together, and now we're in the creep apart stage again.
So when you talk about equal funding, Fran, is that based just on student count, or what is that based off of?
Cities in the first degree, which means schools where they have over, or cities where they have over 100,000. Rochester moved into a city of the first degree.
Right.
They have all kinds of different funding available to them that those of us that are not cities in the first degree don't. As far as building, before we had long-term facility maintenance, the cities in the first degree got about 25 cents for every nickel that we got for new buildings, which is why with long-term facility maintenance, we're still not allowed to build with that money. We can only fix what we have, and what we have found out is we can only do like for like. If we remodel, we have to put in basically exactly what was there. If we change the configuration, we can't use long-term facility maintenance money. Where cities of the first degree can take their money and build brand new buildings, build on additions, that's fine. Where that's not an option for us with the same kind of funding source.
Yeah, in some of those places, you see some quite Taj Mahal places for, as for schools, you know. It's I don't know. I mean, architecture's a dream, I think, is what it is in some of these places. But I mean, that nothing you can do about it.
No,
so,
but
no.
what I'm I'm not looking to, what we have done in the last couple of years with the board's guidance with rehabbing our buildings, we have buildings that are older than the average building by a long shot. However, these buildings are going to last much longer than the new buildings that are being constructed. These are solid.
These are solid.
They are
right?
well
Yep.
kept.
Yep.
And we have really worked within the last 5 years to make sure that the taxpayers aren't going to have to do that bond for a new building, because that really does do a number on your taxes. So we're trying to really take care of what we have. But with that, there are some other schools that just don't have that opportunity. Their buildings have.
So there's just two levels in the state of Minnesota, is what you're saying. Level 1, level 2.
Well, there's
like over 100,000 people.
Yep.
Right.
And then within those that are slightly, the metro schools end up with added funding for achievement and integration is one of the things where they levy against their communities, and then the state pays more. And if you are in what's considered a more impoverished community, then they provide more aid for that. There are a lot of extra
funding. If you look at the bills that come through for state funding, instead of just putting the money on the general fund, which would then spread evenly to everybody according to the number of kids they have, they earmark for different projects. And when you're earmarking for different projects, a lot of times those projects are just in the metro area. Rushford and Moose Lake are a great example of earmark projects where they earmarked money for them to build the new schools. And that counts as part of the education overall package. But I'm not begrudging Rushford School at all, and I don't want anyone to think that, but that money that was part of the education package doesn't help us at all. It was great for Rushford, and they've got a great school. It's a beautiful school. But
So out of curiosity, Minnesota's always been kind of the top state as far as student achievement. Is that still the case? Or?
Our ACT for the state of Minnesota, for the schools, for the states where the majority of the students take the ACT, we are still at the top. Massachusetts has higher, but in Massachusetts, the majority of students take the SAT instead of the ACT. ACT tends to be more of a Midwestern test. But the ACT is kind of the litmus test as far as how you're doing as a state as a whole. Okay. Now here's, if we could blow this up a little bit, this is what I'm talking about as far as funding is trailing. If you're looking at, this is adjusted for inflation. So the red line is the number that we're actually getting. So it looks like, wow, you're getting a lot more money, but if you're adjusting that for inflation, it's not keeping up. Okay, so the next slide. This is, I want you to remember this slide because this is what schools are doing to compensate for that. The state aid and then the revenue are the blue and the yellow lines. And that's kind of 2003, it's coming in 2003 where everything was equalized, and then it dipped down in 2013, and then 14, they had to revamp some of it again because they realized that there was this huge split. Levy, that's your excess tax that the districts are doing to make up that difference.
And that's all based on property tax.
Yes. Yep. And this is how rural districts basically are falling behind. There you've got the state aid change, local levies have had to go up, and then revenues and rural districts, we can't afford to tax because we don't have as many people and properties over which to spread that tax impact. Where in larger communities with more properties, you can see that we've had to, per pupil, tax a lot more. Next. So here's property classification. This is, you got this back in the spring as far as your new estimated market value. I really wish I would have looked at mine in the spring. I didn't really pay attention to it like most people until my proposed tax notice came in November, and I almost hit the floor because my property went up by 22%. The market value, the estimated market value was increased by 22%. So that meant that my taxes went up by 25%. And I thought, oh man, we're gonna have a full house for the truth in taxation meeting.
Well,
We
so-
don't.
Well, yeah, out of curiosity, on my 3 properties in Houston here, go from 21% to 50 increase on the school side.
Are you commercial?
Commercial and non-homestead, yep.
Okay, there will be a slide that will explain that.
Yeah.
As far as what happened with the taxes
Yeah.
to make that change. Okay. This is it. So effective tax rates. If you're looking at commercial industrial, it is now, you're paying 3.66% on that commercial industrial, where the farm property is 52. So you can see that commercial industrial is taxed much more heavily.
They get that, yeah.
Yep, so. Going on to the next slide. Now, this one, because of ag to school credit, because of some other changes that they've made, you'll notice that resident, commercial, and industrial to offset, because ag to school credit took the farm from 18% of the tax burden down to 6% of the tax burden. The state had to come up with some way to cover that. And so now they readjusted it, so then the commercial and industrial that used to share 12% of the burden has now bumped up to 28. So I was expecting commercial and industrial people to be in here, because my guess was your tax is more than doubled.
As well as other things, yeah.
Yeah.
Seasonal rec.
Yep.
Well, seasonal rec was about the same, I see, but.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I was talking about. The ag to school bond credit increased from 40% last year to 50%. They're trying to simplify the categories, and in simplifying the categories, they have to still generate the same amount of money. So they take two categories and put them together, where one might have had a tax break and the other one didn't, and now neither one has a tax break. So that was, the ag to school became permanent in 2017. It doesn't really help us much, because ag to school credit, where it has the biggest bang, is where you've got a bond, a building bond. And so our farmers are like, well, why is everybody else's, all the other farmers' taxes going down in these surrounding areas and ours aren't? They're going down because it's affecting the Fund 7 debt levies. And Fund 7 are those building bonds, general operating bonds, those voter-approved bonds. We don't have any. We have found a way to do it without having to go and ask the community for the extra funds.
So for example, Rushford would have that then, right?
Oh, yeah, and I've got a slide coming up that really shows you how,
Okay.
yeah. And so if you're talking to Rushford farmers, yeah, their taxes look much better this year. So that's what kind of happens. The ag to school accounts for $51.8 million in the school bonds that are out there. And so the state had to come up with some way to pay for the 51.8 million that the ag to school reduced from the farmers' taxes. Okay, so here's, if you get it, that's where it is on your tax statement. Now that's exactly what my tax statement looks like, because the ag market value credit, I live in town. I've got a whole lot of nothing there. And that's the same as this. So that credit would take things off. Okay, so here, 52.8% of our net tax capacity, and that's how they figure out funding, is in ag land or timber. And you'll notice that the district total, that the farmers are going down, their taxes will go down $5.44 for every $500,000 of tax or market value land that they have, which is not really that much. And this is why. How do we compare? Houston is, if I come over here and not stand in anybody's way, Houston is this little white patch right there. The other little white patch is La Crescent. La Crescent is, this is before, this graph came out before they did the new bond and the votes for November. La Crescent passed one.
Yeah.
And so La Crescent is no longer going to be the ecru color next year, because they will have bumped into either the yellow or the, what is that, burnt umber? I don't know, orangish. This is Rushford in the bright red. And so their ag to school credit, they're getting a boatload of ag to school credit. Caledonia, because of their building, they're above the median. But here you see Spring Grove and Mabel didn't have building projects because they couldn't, their communities couldn't afford it. So then they don't have the benefit of the ag to school credit.
So the red ones are better off that way to the ag to school.
They're better
credit.
off with the ag to school,
Credit. Okay.
but their farmers are better off. Their businesses are
And they're homeowners, they're gonna pay, I went through it with Caledonia, I owned a restaurant there, and, when they built the new school, our taxes at our restaurant, just for the new school, increased $1,000 a year, over and above what I was paying, just for the new school, for basically, in my opinion, ever. It's still, I will be on there till, well, I don't own it anymore, so I don't have to worry about it, but that's my point, when you build a new school, good times.
30, I didn't.
Yeah,
know
it's
to-
30
they're
years.
30 years.
But I think they might have done some
They did something
sleight of hand and changed the thought of how they did it, but whatever. Anyway,
that was one of those earmark things that got
yeah,
in the
it
whole
was
head.
unbelievable when we got our taxes, and new schools are great until you get your tax bill, and then even in Caledonia, that thing is not even remotely close to being utilized. I mean, there's there's still kids. The population in Houston County in general is going down, or stagnant.
Yeah, it's about stagnant.
We could
Caledonia hasn't changed.
definitely use, like, building on a couple more rooms here, but
Well, I mean, in Caledonia hasn't, I think the sign on the population sign, when I drove in the first time I came to town 30 years ago, hasn't changed a lick. It's the same. But yet they can justify building a school, and I understand the whole paradigm of the school and so on and so forth, but I don't know necessarily that makes your kids smarter. I employed a lot of them.
and we'll leave it at that. Okay, next slide. Okay, operating referendum is 100% voter approved. The $300 local optional revenue is something that's board approved. We could go up to $724 per pupil. We are one of the few places that doesn't. We reduce that down because most boards know that that is basically free money for them, where they don't have to go out and ask the voters. Almost every district just maxes that out to the $724. Because the majority of our students, about 2/3 of our students are not resident students. What we do is figure out what we would get if we got the $724 for our resident pupils, and then we adjust the local optional revenue down to that dollar amount, so that our local people are just paying for the local students.
So you're talking about the virtual academy, right? So,
We made a promise to the community that having MNVA would not impact your taxes, and we're the way the state funded education up to 2013, that was very easy to do. After 2013, they changed it from resident pupil unit funding to average daily membership, and average daily membership includes all the students that are open enrolled to us, including the MNVA kids. And so at that point, Gwen's job got much harder, where we're trying to compute exactly what we would have made, or what we would have raised in taxes had we still had the resident pupil unit. And so we are really, as a board, working hard at keeping it to that dollar amount, so that MNVA is just a benefit and not a drag on the economy here.
are you experiencing as a district outflow, like along the edges there toward Hoka and up toward Caledonia, going toward La Crescent and Caledonia, more than come to Houston, or are you seeing students staying within the district coming here.
We are positive as far as open enrollment.
Oh, you are?
We are, even locally, we are getting more than we're losing.
And is it going, in the last 15 years, is it going up or is it going down?
As far as our local
Student.
enrollment,
Yes,
our local enrollment is,
For the past 15 years has gone down.
yes,
Um,
but the past five,
pretty much stays the same.
past five, we've stayed the same where other people have dropped.
right. And what's your, you must have a prognosis as to, is it gonna stay that way? It's gonna, the only way it's gonna increase is if you get, if there's jobs and you get people to move in the area, and that's
And
the,
housing, and housing.
you can build, I'll tell you what, if you got a good job, you can build a house.
Yeah, you've got a good manufacturing base or.
Yeah, exactly. You
yeah,
can go out and build a
Housing will
house.
come, or.
We don't have. a
I know.
And that's one of your problems, is your commercial property, you don't have any.
And the
compared
commercial
to-
property we do is getting taxed to the hilt, so they
That's
don't,
right.
we
It
don't. Yeah.
kills it.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have one big class coming through, and once that's through, we're probably gonna drop.
Yeah, our seventh grade right now is, the numbers like we used to have in the seventies. As far as there's, 58 kids in the class. And that used to be, that was like the class of, I think, 74 had about that.
That was a norm for
Yeah.
many, many
Yeah,
years.
oh, yeah.
So when we see that class go up, we're gonna drop.
Right,
And I graduated from La Crescent, and I think we graduated in 1973, 160 kids, I think it was.
oh, the Crescent's down to about 100 a class.
Is that right?
That's why you had said the population of the county, is it going up, down, what's it doing? It's going down.
Yeah.
Very slowly, but it's going down. Well, the nature of how many kids you have in school, just because the population is having less kids,
Right.
and so
Yeah,
therefore that goes down.
We don't have the big families like,
Yeah,
I get that.
Well, okay,
What
I
about
can't
home-
say much because I didn't have a big family either.
What about homeschooling? I mean, do
There's-
you
there-
get any
we-
money for that or not?
No.
No.
You don't? If they homeschool, you get nothing? Okay.
Here with the operating referendum, there's no operating referendum in 111 districts. They're the really light ones. We're that. La Crescent now has one. Winona's, I think, finally passed. So we're going to be a little island here. Next year, this map, we will be the only white one. You'll notice your Caledonia, there you are, dark red. That means that they're in the highest tier for amount. That explains the, how much we can, and the state sets these levels.
So where are you, tier, which one?
Oh,
Which one are you?
okay, so we're here, and then we decide here how much to move this to the 724 that we would have, if all of our resident pupils would have gotten the 724, where that would be. And so we have part of this one. We have 0 here, 0 there. So this, remember that graph I told you before where the red line as far as the levy was just going up for the average? This is just what Houston's graph looks like. So you'll notice that our levy actually has come down. This is where we had the referendum, and when the referendum sunsetted, we never did another one. And so we are actually lower than what we had taxed there as far as a levy. And then we have our revenue, and you'll notice here's 2013. Remember me talking about the state changed the way they did their funding? And it's come up, so we're finally back to, this is the year where we did the whole long-term facility maintenance building project, where we did the new HVAC system in the elementary school. We did new windows, we really made everything energy efficient, and so it's saved money. the new LED lights, we started seeing a change in our electric bill the month after they were installed. So the money that we spent has been worthwhile. So here's our funding history, projected. Here's fiscal 2003. There we've got what we're projected for 2021. Notice it's going down. The property wealth per pupil stayed the same this year. So even though some properties were evaluated higher, this wasn't reflected in the overall market computation for the district. And the biggest impact, notice that industry across the state went from 12 to 28%. When we don't have the industry base, we don't have that 28% to offset it. Those that have the commercial properties really felt the pain. We just don't have enough commercial properties to spread it over. And so this shows you that we've got the bonds that we do have. We had some bonds on our, as far as health and safety, the HVAC system here at the high school, and then the HVAC system at the elementary. Those will sunset in 2023, which sounds so far from now, but it really isn't. It's 3 years. And then 2030. Okay, we've talked about that. Long-term facility maintenance. We don't really have any major things to do anymore because we kind of ripped off the Band-Aid and did them all at once. We lived in a construction zone for some summer, and we did another project this last year and this last summer, but that's, other than some concrete sidewalks, we don't really have any long-term facility maintenance to do, which means those facility maintenance are gonna be a lot shorter.
Were you able to pay for that on your general fund, or did you have to?
Long-term facility maintenance,
Yeah.
with long-term facility maintenance, because of the age of our buildings, we get, the state covers 87% and we pay 12%.
Oh, okay.
And so we could actually do, within the last 5 years, we have done now about $6 million worth of improvements without having to impact taxes at all. Okay, so with operating referendum, we have 111 here. This does have some new, so here we've got La Crescent now is red. This is a new update. Remember I said the old one didn't have the taxes. Now this has got the new voter approved in there, where you've got all of those districts around us that are either orange or red. And we're sitting without one. So going on. Property wealth, our market value. Our district is at 352,000. You'll notice the lowest quartile starts at 333. We are darn close to the lowest quartile. And you'll see that Spring Grove is, I think, at 331 or 329. So it's not really that different from us, but they're in the lowest quartile where we're in the below the median. We do have some elementary plumbing, but that's not a major project. That's as major as we want to do at this point. And that shows you the state share, our revenue, the state share, the aid that they're giving us to pay for the bonds we have for the long-term facility maintenance is close to $700,000. So what does that mean? these are the proposed amounts on your tax statement. And, what we typically do is in September, adjust down those categories that we can. And then, wait to see what else falls out, because the state usually doesn't have all their funding, as far as their equations figured out in September yet. That usually comes a little later, so then we ratchet it down a little bit. And then now, at the December 19th meeting, we decide where we can actually land, and it's usually below what's on your proposed statement.
So when do you make that decision? December 19th?
December 19th, but you'll see the scenarios right now that we'll be going through. This is the proposed, and this is if we're reducing down the long-term facility maintenance, but we're keeping the local optional revenue at the max. So if we do that, it will raise taxes 14%. And it will, provide some extra revenue for us.
So when you say raise taxes 14%, that's average on everything then, right?
That's 14% on a $100,000 homestead home. If
Not
you're
on
look-
commercial?
No, not on a homestead home, we're looking at 1.01% of the tax burden. If you're looking at 14% on that $100,000 home, if you wanna convert that to, you remember the commercial was 3.66. And so you've gotta look at all
Calculate
that,
out.
yep. Okay, and then this is if we reduce the long-term, not the long-term, if we reduce the local optional revenue and keep your flat tax, we actually end up generating less money than we did before. And so then the next one is if we reduce the local optional revenue to keep the general ed revenue the same. And that would have an impact of 2% on taxes, a 2% tax raise. So that's, and I've got a spreadsheet that we'll be sharing too, that the board's used to seeing, so they can see everything side by side and see all the numbers with it. So I think that's the end. Do you want to ask questions now, or would you rather see that entire spreadsheet up there to see all the numbers side by side before you ask questions? And, okay, if you've got poaching, man, that's really,
Yeah.
okay.
Pretty.
Okay, so this is,
Microdot.
I don't know how to do it.
if you're looking at it, this second column, if you're looking at your sheet, the second column is what's on your proposed statement.
Second column of numbers?
The second column of numbers, yes, that's what's on your proposed statement, this second column of numbers right here. The third column over is keeping the local optional revenue at its max. And if, we scroll up, this is not a touch screen. This is what the board really needs to look at, is the board looks at the bottom line. Just as they were here before, they were saying they're not gonna, they're looking at the bottom line, what actually happened. Okay, so, with this one, as far as, what money, general aid, what we get is, we end up getting, an extra, about 200,000 by doing that.
Am I reading that right? 2,335,000, right, or am I reading the wrong
Yeah.
line here?
Yeah,
2,335,619.
is this one?
That one's right above it.
Yeah, these are the same numbers, that's not,
That's because that's Gen Ed.
okay,
LTFM doesn't affect Gen Ed.
okay,
So if you look down below, that's total.
okay. And it's, when we're looking at it, yeah. So we're looking at, the estimated changes. So when
So
we're,
where it says a percentage of change of local revenue of 8%, that means what?
your tax rate would go up by, about 8%.
The total revenue,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, on
Revenue,
total revenue.
revenue.
total
Taxes
revenue,
will go
all the
up.
money that they're generating.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay.
So, here's the tax impact up here, okay, so your tax rate, this is proposed, the tax rate is 0.74. And so then that would raise your taxes by 24.2. With this one, by keeping the local optional revenue, that would increase your taxes by 14.1. And on that $100,000 home. The next one would be keeping your flat tax, so your taxes would not change a bit. But in looking at that one, we, actually lose revenue for the school to operate by keeping taxes flat. So in the next one over, if we raise it just 2.3%, at that one, we can keep the general ed revenue, that we will generate the same general ed revenue, so we can, keep the budget flat.
So if you raise it 2.3%, you would just stay even, more or less.
Right,
Right.
Okay,
But
And
right
that's-
now, you're looking at 8.
well,
are you looking at 8 or 14%?
Well,
this,
we look at all of them, we
Right.
kinda try to, Gwen sits on like,
This
she's
is the
saying,
one-
takes numbers and calculates.
this is the row you guys are
Yep.
worried about.
Yeah, right.
So right now I've got two audiences. I've got you worried about your taxes. I've got the board worried about what we're generating as far as the
Oh,
general fund.
I understand.
So here, this is what you're worried about as far as what's gonna happen to your taxes. We've got these options, as far as this option would generate 8% more for us for the general fund. However, that has a 24.2% impact on your taxes. This one has a 14.1, and once again, that generates the 8%. But
Because of
then-
that, because of that formula, or whatever
Mhm.
that is, yeah.
This one keeps your taxes absolutely flat and they're not changing, but then the board's looking at the fact, hold on a second, that reduces the amount of money we're getting by almost 1%.
No,
And then-
as a prudent, business decision, you have to maintain or increase a little bit, because you just don't know what's gonna happen. And unfortunately, I mean,
Yeah, and we're trying to be as fiscally responsible as we can be, but I also know that we've got inflation. So even holding it flat, that means that we're going to have to make some budget cuts.
Yeah, there's no excess.
No, no,
Now, cause mine, basically, my school tax last year was 1,300 and proposed is 1,569. So that's 300, or,
Now remember,
200
proposed.
that's proposed,
the 24%.
and so that's looking at
Right.
that 24.2%.
Right.
And so we're talking about either putting it at 0 or 2.3 from the 24.
We're forced to propose high because we can't raise it, but we can lower it. So we hate to do it every year, but we have to do that just to protect ourselves.
I hate to come here every year.
Right, well, it's
Well,
kinda
it's
like,
nice to see it.
it's not, yeah,
We're
we'd like
nice
to see-
people.
We'd like to see somebody.
It's
But it's kinda
Nobody
like
likes to
Gwen
pay
said.
taxes, nobody, you know.
But one thing that helps you a lot is you're living in Yucatan Township. If you were living in the city of Houston, it'd be far worse.
Well, right now, if this went through as written or printed here, I would pay more to the school than I pay to the county.
oh, yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah, but the reason we do that, like Corinne had pointed out earlier, is we don't know what the state's gonna do with their dollars. So we max it out, so that allows us from the time that comes about to this time to see where everything falls.
Yeah.
Cause they may adjust things, and that's where Gwen comes into play, where she can say, okay, we don't wanna lose any, if you wanna call it free money we get from the state,
Right,
but,
No,
so
I-
we
I-
have to adjust
I get
things
it.
so we can maximize that dollar without affecting
we
the
want
taxpayer.
as much aid as possible with as little levy as possible. And there are some things where you don't get the aid unless you levy. And so we have to, all the different cells and,
Maybe you should pool all the school districts together, these small ones that are getting shortchanged, and go to the state and lobby them and say, why don't you make this a little simpler so we don't have to
do,
be rate searching
at
to figure it
least
out?
once a year, MREA, and that's, we're
have a
members
lobbying
of
group,
Minnesota Rural Education Association. We go up and lobby, and Fred Nolan is the head of that, and, Fred leads us to, and, there are some people who are very willing to listen, and, there are some of our representatives that,
Well, because you'd mentioned earlier about the, bigger schools and the ability for them to take money and do whatever they want with it, or so it seems, on some of the monies that they get.
Correct.
First I heard about it, how come somebody doesn't write it in the Minneapolis paper and put it in there so people actually know what's going on?
Well,
Just because you live in a rural community doesn't mean you should get, there should be two sets of rules. And basically it's all
Minneapolis
like-
paper is
They
They want it
dangerous
that
in
way up
Mount
there
State.
though.
What's that?
They want it that way up there.
Oh,
And
sure,
it's-
I'm sure they got, some of those school districts got 15 assistant superintendents at $250,000 a crack. So,
and it's one of those things that we have been fighting this. Actually, the first Minnesota Supreme Court case on school funding was 1971. So we've been fighting this since 1971, that at that point, they called us outstate. And now they're calling us Greater Minnesota. But, we have been fighting to get equal funding for our kids.
Actually, it's gotten better over the last 15 years than it was, in my mind. I mean, it used to
But
be
it should
just
be- there
the
should
big
be-
schools got
no discrepancy, no disparity.
hand over.
Should be all the same.
Oh,
Yeah.
2003, there was the court case, and
Yeah.
after 2003, it got better, and then it started splitting.
Yeah,
In
then it changes.
2013, they had to revamp it again, but it has, in revamping it, they have made the education code as far as the different formulas used for funding so convoluted that
Well, that's government for you.
it, the person in charge of finance at Minnesota Department of Ed wants to retire, but he doesn't feel he can until he does something to try to make the funding more understandable, cause right now, if anybody has a question, we all have to ask Tom Melcher. And he said, if he's not here, who are you going to ask? And I said, we'll call you at home. What are you talking about?
So you guys have any other
And-
questions?
Well, Larry, in your case too,
Yeah.
I pulled up one of your properties here a little bit ago, they're all public, so.
yeah, no, I
Yeah.
know, I agree.
But anyway, without mentioning numbers or whatever, a rental property that you have, I would encourage you to go talk to the, assessor's office.
Well,
Because, I did that, I have a rental in Houston, and I felt it was overvalued. And so then I went to talk to them after that last April meeting, remember you were at that, at the city. And you can encourage them to come and go through your property. Now, they supposedly did Houston all of this year, but you have to remember that assessor's office is all new people now, except for the head of it. And so, I did get them to come down and look at my place, and when they looked at my place, they went, oh, this isn't a two-story. So, they're now going to reduce mine. Well, I was actually there today now, and argued with them, it didn't get reduced. Well, it slipped through the cracks, see? So you gotta really keep on top of this.
oh,
The reason I bring it up
Yeah.
for you
Yeah.
is because you have a property, I sell real estate, so I know. You have a property that I think, if I could sell it for that, it would be really good, okay? So you have justifiable reason to talk to them about reducing, the market value of your property.
Yeah, cause
okay,
the,
which will reduce your taxes.
yeah, the valuation, the valuation increased a lot.
It did,
Yeah, a
it
lot.
did, and I think you can do that. Now, unfortunately, Dave, I looked at yours too. Yours is pretty close, but you wanna
Believe me,
keep on top of it.
I'm not complaining what the assessed value is. I
Right.
was just curious as to the increase in the school. I just
Oh,
wanted,
that made total sense,
Yeah.
that point you brought up.
that's all I'm,
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent, that was very good.
Yeah.
But that's why we all gotta stay on top of what are they assessing our properties at? Because if you're not paying attention, I mean, there's times I list a property that I look at their assessed value and it's like, whoa,
Well,
where did this figure come
what they
from?
usually do though, and I'm sure what they didn't look at every property in Houston. All they did was go in and they looked at maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 sales maybe. They
Correct.
looked at those and they said, well,
Correct.
they're all up 15%,
Well,
and then they just went through and went,
And if they
Well,
don't get
yeah.
into your house,
Yeah.
if they call you and they make an appointment or whatever, or they stop by and they don't go in, then they do a projection.
Well,
That
and that's what they
projection
did
could
with
hurt
mine.
you.
There was no sales about duplexes in Houston, so they used all the duplexes that were sold in La Crescent. And they used that number to
Exactly.
put on mine here
Right.
in Houston,
Right, and I've
So-
had a visit with them about that exact same thing,
you know?
and, yeah,
it's like apples and oranges.
Well, yeah, you know,
yeah,
so,
but they're really good to work
oh,
with.
I know,
So if you go visit them
yeah.
and talk to them, they're great to listen to your side.
You do gotta
Cindy,
stay on them, cause they
so you
will
want
say
to
they're
talk-
gonna do something, and then all of a sudden, it doesn't get done, and well, look, we can do it next year now, but we can't do it this year because it's too late.
By the time.
Remember
yeah.
the squeaky wheel gets
Yeah,
oiled.
you gotta stay on 'em.
Yeah, and I get really busy on a lot of things, and so, I mean, some things
Yeah.
just get,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, so that's why I came here, just to, well, just see all the smiling faces here.
Not right. I doubt
Did,
that.
did the presentation help?
It does, I mean, I realize that you always put these scare tactic numbers out here, you know, every year. And I was hoping that you wouldn't follow through on that.
And it's not a scare tactic, we're trying to
Trying to
hedge.
get an audience.
Well, yeah, but that is a good way to try to get an audience.
It's out of
I
necessity.
think you gotta provide some alcohol, I'm just gonna
Not in the school, not, no.
Actually, if you were in Rushford, the farmers there, like the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah, they got,
Got beat up
They got
really bad, and they were really upset. Well, what nobody explained to them was the fact that their taxes went up first, sky high, but then it was going to be absorbed by the city later, and theirs was going to drop. Nobody explained that to them, and that, you know, so that's what you're seeing going on now, as Fred pointed out.
well, it's like, I mean, I live in La Crescent, and of course, they passed that school thing last year.
Mhm.
Well, the school portion of my taxes went up like 70-some percent.
Mhm.
70-some percent.
That's bad, really.
That's what.
That's not so bad?
No.
Oh, why,
Yeah.
what?
That's why
Caledonia
we're-
is way worse than that.
It was?
Oh, yeah.
And that's why we are trying to do things
Terrible.
without doing those bonds and building, because it kills the taxpayers.
Well, you probably didn't have the numbers of students and stuff like that, were you?
Well, that's the thing, they spent almost $30 million, and you look at the amount of people that they're trying to get money from, it just doesn't pencil out. I don't know how Rushford did it,
Especially
They're
with the
gonna be-
population going down.
The state paid for half of their building.
still, they're still gonna be, these people are, wait and see what happens. About 10 years when that thing just starts to go like this, and them restaurants and bars and stuff are just getting clobbered, and rental properties and stuff will go up so high that, I mean, in Caledonia, at our restaurant, we paid over $10,000 a year. For a restaurant in Caledonia of 2,800, that's insane. 10 grand, that's a lot of money.
You're in
I
a good,
think.
you're in a good location though.
Yeah, I'm out in the middle of that freaking
Industrial park?
I was, but, I don't know, anyway, that was, you basically answered my question, and as far as all this stuff, I felt like I was back in school, and I wasn't really, I have a hell of a time paying attention to this stuff, but I do get it.
Well, I'm just gonna throw
Well,
a
thank you, now I
question.
feel like I'm back in the classroom.
Yeah, you did,
I like
if you
that.
get to me, you get to anybody.
Pete, I'm just gonna ask you a question.
Yeah,
Isn't this gonna put pressure on, commercial properties as far as valuations, to try and sell them, the valuations of commercial properties are gonna go down? I mean, they're gonna have to or
Yes,
offset some of this
It is, and
cost.
part of their problem is that you hit it on the head a little bit ago. You have a duplex, and when they tried to come up with a valuation for you, obviously they're not gonna find duplexes in Houston itself.
Right.
So then they do have to go, they gotta
Other-
expand,
right.
and sometimes they're going in the wrong direction there. Well, you're gonna have the same problem with businesses. Businesses are not selling either. Now, I've had a couple bar restaurants for sale for a long time, and they're still for sale. Well, what are they gonna compare to? You know, if you've got a bar restaurant, what are they comparing it to? All they have is what they had existing. As far as new sales, there aren't many there. So you're absolutely right, as the taxes go up on that, the interest of the buyer starts, you know, starts to wane.
Well, especially to pay the kind of price that the original owner would like to see,
Right.
you know.
Right. And you can't compare, like, we're talking about comparing our school district to a large school district. Same thing with, you can't compare a restaurant or bar in a small town to one that's in La Crosse.
No, well.
You know, you can't compare that. It's just two different worlds.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Nope, I'm good.
Appreciate you guys coming in.
We should get like a smiley face or something.
Yeah, that'd be
Well, otherwise,
solid.
otherwise they'd be talking to the wall.
Something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we are streaming, so this will be on YouTube forever.
Oh,
Oh, great.
Okay, so do we have a motion to reconvene to that?
I have a motion.
I second it.
We have a motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, do we have a
And then we have a
motion
motion
to go into close
to into
for
closed and we'll-
negotiation?
So move.
Second, discussion, all in favor? Okay.
And we will be going into closed in the conference room and we'll be adjourning from there.
No, that's
So we're not
Thanks for
going to
your
make
time.
any
Yep,
decisions.
thanks again for coming.